Imagine waking in a magnificent city where the destinies of millions intertwine in its labyrinthine streets, where rulers sit on thrones in opulent palaces, and the destitute seek refuge in the shadow of the Colosseum. Welcome to Rome, the eternal city, the cradle of civilization. For over 2 centuries, from 27 BCE to 180 CE, ancient Rome experienced an unprecedented flourishing. This was an era of stability, territorial expansion, and cultural splendor, known to history as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. The empire seemed invincible, military conflicts subsided, cities were adorned with majestic architectural ensembles, and civilization reached new horizons. But what was daily life truly like in this brilliant Rome? What did people feel as they walked its crowded streets, breathing in the aromas of bustling markets, living in humble insulae, visiting public baths, and watching gladiatorial contests? Let us journey into the very heart of this mighty ancient empire to feel its pulse and rhythm of life. Rome was not merely a metropolis, it was a living organism that breathed, grew, and evolved. Even at the beginning of the imperial era, its size was astonishing. During Augustus's reign, Rome's population exceeded 800,000. By the Antonine period, some estimates suggest over 1 million people lived there, closely packed among columns, temples, and brick buildings. The Eternal City, like a powerful magnet, drew a diverse populace from every corner of the vast empire. Merchants, skilled artisans, brave retired soldiers, courtesans, government officials, pilgrims, and slaves flocked here from places as varied as the African shores to the Aegean islands, from sun-drenched Spain to mysterious Syria. Hundreds of different languages could be heard on the city's noisy streets, and an altar dedicated to one deity or another stood in every alleyway. The intoxicating aromas of wine mingled with the scent of human sweat and freshly baked bread. The loud cries of traders drowned out the melodic chants of poets, while the incessant clatter of wheels on worn stone set the unique rhythm of life in this bustling metropolis. Rome was an astonishing blend of nobility and baseness, grandeur and squalor, dazzling white marble and foul-smelling open sewers. It was truly magnificent, yet at the same time cruel, chaotic, and inconvenient for living. And yet, despite all its flaws, no one wanted to leave this city, for being at the very heart of the empire gave a sense of belonging to something greater, to the very center of the world. In Rome, housing conditions were a stark reflection of a person's social status and financial standing. The majority of the population lived in insulae, enormous multi-storied buildings constructed from wood, plaster, and cheap brick. These insulae, towering over the city, resembled vast human beehives, unstable, dirty, and dangerous. Just one carelessly lit candle or an overheated cooking stove was enough for an entire building to instantly erupt in flames, turning into a fiery torch. Thousands of families were forced to share thin walls and shaky staircases, living without running water or individual lavatories. Overcrowding and unsanitary conditions were common. The poor slept huddled together, suffering from damp, noise, and swarming parasites. Diseases spread with incredible speed, and during a fire, people had virtually no chance of escape. While the plebeians huddled in wretched hovels, just a few blocks away, the nobility enjoyed life in luxurious domus, private mansions with open atriums, mosaic-decorated floors, elegant fountains, and lush inner gardens. These domus were true miniature palaces where silence was a precious commodity, food was served by slaves, walls were adorned with frescoes, and private baths were commonplace. The higher a citizen's status, the further away from the city's noise and bustle their domus was located, hidden behind walls, colonnades, and shady courtyards. Rome was a city of contrasts, where marble splendor coexisted with extreme poverty. The windows of wealthy homes deliberately did not face the streets, as a downward glance would have reminded them of the empire's underbelly, the hidden side of prosperity. In ancient Rome, visiting the baths was not merely a hygienic procedure, but a complete ritual, combining personal cleanliness with a display of prestige, an opportunity for relaxation, and an assertion of power. Public baths, known as thermae, served as the city's social hub. All strata of society gathered in the thermae, from slaves to senators. Half naked and sweating, they rubbed their bodies with oils and cleaned their skin with bronze scrapers. The thermae were vast complexes comprising cold rooms, frigidaria, warm rooms, tepidaria, and hot rooms, caldaria, as well as swimming pools, saunas, gymnasiums, gardens, libraries, and even places for snacks and conducting business. Bathing was a public act, the body a part of political life, and nudity an element of protocol. While the wealthy were attended by slaves, the poor rubbed and cleaned each other's bodies. It lacked refinement, but fostered social interaction, and was free or almost free, as the state funded many thermae, demonstrating imperial generosity. In ancient Rome, there was another, rather valuable liquid resource: urine. The Romans discovered that the ammonia it contained possessed remarkable properties. It helped to wash clothes, disinfect dishes, and bleach fabrics. Laundry workers, known as fullers, used this secret in their work, diligently treading dirty sheets submerged in vats of fermented urine. This practice proved so effective and useful that Emperor Vespasian, Rome's ruler, decided to introduce a special tax on urine collected in public urinals. His son Titus was shocked by such a decision. However, Vespasian, without losing his composure, held up a coin and uttered the phrase that became famous: "Money doesn't stink." And he was absolutely right. Rome, contrary to expectations, did not reek. It was a city where marble surfaces shone with cleanliness and whiteness, and the smell of crowded streets was artfully masked by the exquisite aromas of incense and expensive oils. The empire, despite its secrets, exuded glory and humanity, creating an unparalleled atmosphere of grandeur. The Roman Empire was powerful and majestic, but also unbearably noisy. The city's narrow streets were constantly filled with carts pulled by stubborn mules, pack animals, persistent street vendors, politicians accompanied by guards, and citizens of all social classes. From dawn until late at night, the din never ceased for a moment. The clatter of wheels striking the cobblestone pavement, the loud neighing of horses, the shouts of merchants calling out to customers, and the continuous hum of the crowd, all these sounds merged into a single cacophony that never quieted, creating a unique soundscape of life in ancient Rome. The eternal city, the cradle of civilization, never knew silence. Julius Caesar, a shrewd politician and strategist, recognized that the chaotic movement of carts in the heart of Rome had become an unbearable burden for its citizens. He issued an edict prohibiting vehicle traffic during the day, hoping to restore peace to the streets. However, this measure only exacerbated the problem, shifting it to the cover of night. As darkness fell, the city came alive. The rumble of carts, the arguments of drivers, the noisy unloading of goods, all this robbed Romans of precious hours of rest. The poet Juvenal, outraged by the lawlessness, bitterly exclaimed that in Rome, only the privileged, steeped in luxury, could afford to sleep peacefully, while the noise and clamor drove sleep from the eyes of common mortals. Imperial Rome was famed for its roads, a true triumph of engineering. The Appian Way, like a steel spine, connected the capital to the southern provinces of Italy, while countless other routes, like blood vessels, permeated the entire empire, ensuring its unity and prosperity. It was not without reason that they said all roads lead to Rome. This was not merely a beautiful metaphor, but a tangible embodiment of the empire's might and grandeur. However, this connectivity came at a high price. Noise, dust, dirt, and unbearable congestion became an inseparable part of Roman life. The city never slept, transforming into the epicenter of an unceasing storm, where every inhabitant felt like a grain of sand lost in the chaos. In ancient Rome, literacy was not universal. State schools, in the modern sense of the word, did not exist. Only a lucky few from wealthy families had the opportunity to study with private tutors or mentors, often highly educated slaves brought from Greece or Asia Minor. Education was considered not a right, but rather a privilege, accessible only to those who could afford it. It was a luxury, an investment in the future, allowing one to attain a higher position in society. In ancient Rome, education represented a complex system reflecting social hierarchy and gender distinctions. Initial instruction involved mastering reading, writing, and arithmetic, laying the foundation for further development. If a family's financial situation permitted, young men received a more advanced education, studying rhetoric, philosophy, law, and literature. The noble aim was to prepare future statesmen, distinguished orators, and influential politicians. Learning was not a solitary pursuit. Wealthy youths were accompanied by pedagogues, often slaves, who carried books, supervised their charges, and, if necessary, administered corporal punishment. Discipline was strict, as knowledge was seen as a tool for shaping personality or ensuring its subservience. Children from poorer backgrounds were denied the opportunity to be taught by teachers. They acquired knowledge at home, often self-taught, and then entered the world of professions, learning their parents' trades, becoming bakers, potters, tanners, or soldiers. Girls faced even greater limitations. They were taught reading and writing only if their father deemed it necessary. However, their primary role was preparation for marriage, obedience, and the performance of domestic duties. Knowledge was considered primarily a male domain, and submission a female one. Nevertheless, some women from the upper echelons of society, educated in secret or by their father's will, achieved significant success in poetry, music, or medicine. But these cases were exceptions rather than the accepted norm. In ancient Rome, education served a dual function. It was both an instrument of governance and a means of maintaining social order. Representatives of the upper classes prepared their heirs for making state decisions and managing the empire, while the less privileged segments of the population were brought up in a spirit of submission and obedience. Regardless of their level of education, every Roman understood from an early age that true glory and recognition were achieved through loyal and disciplined service to Rome. The position of women in Roman society was devoid of civil rights and political influence. She was viewed primarily in the context of her role as a daughter, wife, or mother. Women did not have the right to vote, could not hold public office, and, with rare exceptions, did not participate in the country's political life. Throughout her life, a Roman woman remained under the guardianship of a man, her father, husband, or even an adult son. Her primary task was to fulfill prescribed roles: obedience, care for the home, and procreation. Women from noble families lived in luxurious domus, surrounded by numerous servants. Their days were filled with needlework, participating in feasts, conversing with friends, attending morning shows, and honoring household gods. They possessed ample free time, yet were deprived of true freedom and power, having privileges without the ability to influence the course of events. In contrast, women from the middle and lower classes worked as nurses, midwives, market sellers, cooks, or farmers. Many of them, lacking choice and protection, were forced into prostitution, which, though legal, was subject to social condemnation. The female body in Rome was perceived as a useful and desired object, but rarely accorded true respect and recognition. In ancient Rome, a woman's position in society, defined by strict patriarchal norms, did not allow her to fully realize her potential. However, her role in the family and society was significant and valued in its own way. Only a few women dared to step beyond the rigid boundaries of established rules. The Vestal Virgins, priestesses of the goddess Vesta, guardians of the sacred fire, were a striking example of an exception. Dedicating their lives to the cult, they were chosen at a young age and maintained a vow of chastity for 30 years. Surrounded by honor and fear, the Vestals nevertheless lived a life of isolation from the rest of society. Despite the restrictions, many women found ways to influence events. Remaining in the shadows, they skillfully managed financial flows, forged advantageous family alliances, and raised sons who were destined to become consuls or emperors. Their power, devoid of outward display, was nevertheless quite tangible. In a male-dominated society, some women cleverly manipulated hidden levers of influence. Roman expansion was accompanied not only by the conquest of new lands, but also by the construction of temples, as every subjugated city had to adopt Roman religious traditions. Religiosity was an inherent trait of the Roman people. Each day began with sacrifices, and important decisions were made with omens in mind. A sacred fire was maintained in every home, and offerings of bread, wine, or flowers were made to the household and ancestral gods, the Penates and Laras. Small domestic altars served to maintain spiritual harmony within the family, and rituals were performed by the head of the household. Religion was not a matter of personal choice, but an integral part of family duty. Away from the domestic hearth, beyond the private sphere, stretched the majestic world of public rites and religious ceremonies. Grand marble temples, stately columns, popular festivities, and lavish processions formed the bedrock of Roman spiritual life. Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and Minerva, deities of the Roman pantheon, not only offered an explanation of the cosmos, but also served as pillars for the existing power structure. The emperor, seated at the apex of this system, was not merely a ruler, but was also revered as a demigod. The imperial cult demanded that every citizen express submission by burning incense before his image in specially erected temples. Augustus, Trajan, and Hadrian all received divine honors, becoming objects of universal worship. Faith in this context was synonymous with obedience. Refusal to participate in the imperial cult was considered an act of treason, undermining the foundations of Roman society. However, Rome showed tolerance towards other religious beliefs, as long as they posed no threat to the state order. This is why Egyptian, Syrian, and Persian cults found their place in the diverse religious tapestry of the empire. But Christianity, with its belief in a single God and refusal to acknowledge the emperor's divinity, became the spark that ignited a conflict which later had an enormous impact on the course of history. Roman religion did not demand blind and unconditional devotion, but merely respect for traditions and adherence to the established order. Thus, spiritual life in Rome represented a complex balance between the public and private, ancient traditions and political interests, mystical beliefs, and practical needs. Rome built its empire not only from stone and building materials, but also strengthened it with the might of faith, uniting citizens and upholding the greatness of the state. In magnificent Rome, possessing citizenship was not merely a formality, but a mark of distinction, symbolizing belonging to the elite. However, contrary to popular belief, this status did not guarantee every Roman the right to vote or the ability to influence political life. Roman citizenship was not a universal right, but rather a privilege, a deserved reward for loyalty, a powerful political tool, and simultaneously a social barrier separating the chosen from the rest of the population. For centuries, only those born in the city of Rome itself could proudly call themselves citizens. But as the empire's borders expanded, thousands of inhabitants from Italy, and distant provinces sought to acquire this coveted title. For to be a citizen meant more than just participating in elections. It meant freedom from slavery, legal protection, belonging to the unified organism of the empire, a sense of involvement in its destiny. A Roman citizen had the right to vote, could hold public office, enter into legal marriages, and appear before a court in accordance with Roman laws. However, inequality existed among citizens. Patricians, representatives of noble families, concentrated control over the Senate and the highest state posts in their hands. Plebeians, ordinary citizens, had the opportunity to elect their representatives, but their influence on political life remained insignificant. The Senate, possessing immense power, did not fully reflect the interests of the people. The people, comprising the majority of the population, did not have a decisive voice in state governance. Over time, far-sighted emperors such as Tiberius and Claudius extended the right of citizenship to include allies, soldiers, and representatives of annexed peoples. This step was dictated not so much by generosity as by a desire to strengthen the empire's loyalty and ensure its stability. An important mechanism for confirming citizen status was the census, conducted every 5 years. Citizens were obliged to register, declare their property, information about their children, and their occupations. Failure to comply with these requirements resulted in the loss of citizenship, depriving the person of all associated rights and privileges. Rome, the cradle of civilization, was not just a geographical point, but also a symbol of belonging to a great empire. Yet at the same time an instrument of social control. However, beyond this privileged system remained millions, slaves, women, foreigners, deprived of full rights. Only in the 3rd century, during the reign of Emperor Caracalla, was citizenship extended to all free men inhabiting the empire. By then, however, political power was no longer determined by the will of the people. In Rome itself, the voice of common citizens echoed, but the empire's roar drowned it out. While the emperor governed a vast territory, within the walls of the home, the undisputed master was the pater familias. The Roman family represented not only a social unit, but also an important political and religious institution. At the very heart of this system was the father of the family, the pater familias, endowed with immense powers. He not only managed the household and controlled property, but also served as the domestic priest, judged his children, was their mentor, and, if he wished, could become their executioner. By law, he held power over the life and death of his wife, children, and slaves. He had the right to banish his spouse for economic or moral reasons, sell his children into slavery to pay off debts, and even order their execution if he believed they had stained the family's honor. The pater familias was a figure who commanded reverence, fear, and boundless devotion simultaneously. In ancient Rome, the head of the household, the pater familias, wielded virtually unlimited power over all members of his family. His word was law, and his decisions were unquestionable. The father's authority extended to his wife, children, grandchildren, slaves, and even his property. When a daughter married, control over her life transferred from her father to her husband, symbolizing the steadfastness of patriarchal customs. In the absence of male heirs, the head of the family could adopt a nephew, a talented youth, or even a mature man, demonstrating that the continuation of the lineage was valued above blood ties. However, the pater familias not only ruled, but also bore responsibility for preserving and passing on traditions. He conducted religious rites in honor of the Lares and Penates, oversaw the domestic altar, and provided spiritual guidance for the family. Every meal, every decision, and every festivity was imbued with religious meaning, as true piety began within the family itself. Over time, some of these powers diminished, yet the fundamental principle remained unchanged. The Roman home was not a bastion of democracy. It represented a miniature republic where the father's will was supreme. In the world's most powerful empire, true authority originated at the family table, where values were forged and decisions made that would determine the fate of future generations. The grandeur of Rome, which endured for a millennium, lay not only in its military might but also in its unique way of life and its capacity to dream. The period from 27 BC to 180 AD marked the empire's flourishing era, known as the Pax Romana. This time of peace and prosperity united numerous peoples with diverse languages, beliefs, and cultures under the banner of Rome, creating a unique civilization that left an indelible mark on human history. During the Roman Empire's golden age, characterized by an unrelenting pursuit of greatness, impressive aqueducts, magnificent circuses, sacred temples, and strategically vital roads were constructed, many of which still bear witness to its former might today. It was also then that literary works were created that continue to inspire generations. This civilization, infused with the spirit of marble and blood, philosophy and military prowess, gifted the world architectural masterpieces such as the Colosseum, Trajan's Forum, and Hadrian's Wall. Legal norms were formulated, becoming the cornerstone of the Western legal system, and a unique culture emerged, harmoniously blending elements of Greek, Egyptian, Gallic, and African identities into a unified Roman self-awareness. Rome of that era represented a universal, ambitious, and almost divine entity. However, behind this splendor lay a darker side. Untold riches bred intemperance and excess, whilst outward prosperity masked internal contradictions. The city grew to an exorbitant size, and the ruling elite, preoccupied with self-enrichment, neglected its duties towards a populace content with mere bread and circuses. Nevertheless, Rome left an invaluable legacy. Its architectural achievements, language, principles of social organization, and conceptions of citizenship, family, and authority continue to live on in modern cities, systems of governance, and cultural traditions. For Rome was not merely a city, but a distinct worldview, an aspiration to comprehend the world. It embodied a promise of eternity. And although the Roman Empire fell, its decline was gradual, and the legacy it left behind never fully disappeared. To live in the Rome of the Golden Age meant belonging to something greater than mere individual existence, to something destined not just to exist, but to be continuously reborn across various epochs and corners of history.